I live in my own head all the time, and if I have the opportunity to live in someone else's head, I will do it. Fun fact about my stories is that no one is like ever straight. If I have books I want to publish and to make a career of, great, but I won't allow external pressure to make me feel like that's the next step, because there is no next step except for the one I take. And why is Rachel writing novels? In the comment section of my community tab. We're gonna be doing something a little bit different today. I asked you guys over on my community tab to basically share the reasons why you write and why you're a writer. Even though so many of us write, I feel like we don't necessarily meet that many writers in our lives. Maybe this could just be me, but I've talked about this with the few writing friends and acquaintances that I have. I think because writing can feel so personal, not a lot of people are upfront about having it as a hobby, and I think a lot of people sort of do it quietly or in secret, and I completely understand that. I've never really been like that. I've always been pretty open about writing, but I can understand why it can feel like such a personal thing. But what I find really interesting is learning about other people's writing journeys and how they view craft and what their relationship with it is. So I decided to ask you guys. This really came through. I got so many responses. As I go through them, we are just going to do some makeup. I'll read out some of your answers for people who were so willing and generous to share their responses. Before we like fully go into it, I just kind of want to why I kind of asked this question in the first place. I mean, I already sort of shared why. It's because I was really curious, but I think the other reason is that whenever I start to really feel like quitting, like genuinely quitting, which happens like once a month, I'm not even kidding, I always have to remind myself of the reasons why I enjoy writing. I think ever since I started doing YouTube and just like writing publicly, I guess, the reasons for why I love writing, I started to forget more often. I think there's this like pressure to always feel like I'm accomplishing something and to always like film every step of my writing journey, get caught up in the external validation of things. Anyone who like does authortube or even just like talks about their writing online, y'all can relate. I think at the start of this year, I was having a really tough time with my writing relationship and my writing journey. I think I just needed the reminder that there are so many other like writers, and even though I would say my writing circle is pretty small IRL, there are a lot of people out there that understand the struggle and the vibes. So let's talk about main reasons that I saw from all of your guys' responses. So the first and most obvious one is expression. Basically, you know, I write to let all the stories and thoughts that are in my head. I think writing can feel very therapeutic for a lot of us. I think a lot of people who are writers are we're just caught up in our feelings all the time. There's something that we want to talk about and there's nowhere else to kind of put those feelings. Funny thing, and I guess I should have, this is another question that I have for a lot of writers, is I want to know how many of you guys actually journal. And I mean like a journal about your own feelings, because tried to have a journal when I was a kid, never really was able to get into it or do it consistently, and now it's not really something that I do, but I always was writing stories as a kid. I did see it as escape, but more than that, I saw it as like a better or a more fun alternative to journaling. I always preferred to explore it through the context of like characters and fun worlds and stuff like that. I never necessarily had like the desire to sit down and be like, this is what I did at school today. I don't know. As I grew up and, you know, you start having just strong feelings and struggles and all that kind of stuff, I continued to explore that through stories rather than through journaling. I think that's also why, especially as a teenager and into university even, I was writing mostly contemporary and then literary fiction. I wasn't really writing a lot of fantastical stories as like a teenager and as a young like university student. I really was using writing and fiction as that replacement to having having a therapist, but also like having a diary or whatever. I would write a lot of main characters who were very different than me in personality, because I think I just wanted to like live vicariously through them. Even now, minus the book that I'm writing right now, I live in my own head all the time, and if I have the opportunity to live in someone else's head, I will do it. I don't want to live in my own head if I don't have to. And then the second reason that I saw a lot was representation. I'm not surprised by, I mean, it's definitely getting better now, but obviously growing up as a BIPOC kid in the early thousands, how many main characters in popular, traditionally published fiction looked like me. I think I've talked about this in videos before, but the first time that I ever read a book by a Filipino author featuring a Filipino main character and that centered a Filipino experience was in 2020. I was 20 or 21. Oh my god, how old am I? Yeah, and it's just crazy to go through an entire childhood of reading books and writing and then not reading I guess like books from diverse perspectives like for most of my life. And so yeah, a lot of responses that I saw as well from you guys was writing stories because you can finally sort of tell the stories that you never had as a kid. I think that's honestly a big reason that I write right now too. There's so many stories that or there's so many different types of characters that I wish I could have had growing up, and if I had encountered these kinds of stories or these kinds of characters when I was maybe not even a kid, maybe just like 15 or 16, I would have really started writing Filipino characters, or just like characters that sort of share my own cultural experiences and stuff like that way sooner than 21 or 22. Own voices can get a little bit complicated when you are like demanding to quantify people's like marginalized identities, I guess. Overall, I think despite those things, the conversations that been started around diversifying traditional publishing, I would like to think that these conversations are in the long run for the better. The third thing that I saw a lot of was, I don't really know what to call this, but basically just like perception, like wanting to be perceived. It's the desire to be a published writer. There isn't too much that I want to say about this other than it's very relatable, me too. A lot of you guys have stated that you were just kind of drawn to writing when you were younger. That's literally my journey as well. I can't remember a time when I didn't want to be a writer. I think the reason that I got into books was just like, there were always kind of books around the house. I distinctly remember like on weekends, like when I was younger, my parents would like take us to the bookstore. So yeah, I have like very distinct core memories of like, I would always go to the bookstore and I would want to buy a new book. And then I would have to like take the book to my dad, and then I would show him the book and he would literally like analyze it. Like he would do like he would look at it, he would read the plot summary, and then he'd look at the price, and then he'd be like, why do you want this book? And then I would have to like I would have to like debate him on like why it's a worthy book to buy. Okay, the fourth reason, writing because it gives you a sense of release. Obviously this goes hand in hand with expression, but I think it's also like you feel like you're going to explode, you know, if you don't write, or because pent up emotion, and the only way that you can really explore it is through writing about it, which kind of goes hand in hand with the next one that I wrote about, which is compulsion. And I saw a couple answers like this, and I think I've literally said this as well, but the reason that I feel like I'll never actually fully quit writing is because I can't not write. Like sometimes writing genuinely feels like my default state of being. Like I can't stop my brain from thinking about stories and wanting to write my own, wanting to analyze them. I can't stop myself from wanting to write my own stories. Like that's what good media does for me, and I know that's the case for a lot of other writers as well. And I think the feeling that I really miss, that I always used to have as a child, is like that urge to just like run to my computer, and it's like there's nothing more that I want to do today than to just sit alone with my characters, you know? And then the last reason, and this is probably my favorite reason, you write because it's fun. It's genuinely fun. And you know, like you're not doing it with any serious expectations. If you are someone that's like, I want to get traditionally published, or I want to publish a book, writing starts to get less fun sometimes because you're starting to do it with an audience in mind. Marketing, you're starting to think about, is this actually a good story? I think that's when writing can genuinely feel stressful. Longer that I've spent writing, the older I've gotten, writing when you're a kid is like the best. Once you get older and publishing is like all you can think about, there is so much stress, and I feel like nowadays I am more stressed out when I'm writing than I am having fun. There are exceptions. There are definitely some days where I'm like genuinely having a good time and I don't even like care anymore most of the time, and I really want to try to lose this mindset, or at least reduce this mindset. I can't stop thinking about external validation and about kickstarting my writing career. The stress that gives me, the feeling that I'll never be successful, it starts to really like weigh on you because you're always going to compare yourself to someone else. That can suck the joy out of a lot of writing. I want to write because it's fun. I want to have more of those days where writing just feels the only thing I want to do, the most fulfilling thing, and I want to seek more of that internal validation rather than the external. So I actually want to read some of the responses that I got from you guys. Yeah, I also had a Google form for anyone who wanted to submit anonymously. Thank you to whoever submitted this. One thing that really stood out to me about this comment was that they said, to do that, I've committed to writing at least one word every day, even on the bad ones. When I feel I'm having a tough day, I simply sit down, put on a 5-minute timer, and write whatever. I give myself the permission to write horrible words, feel horrible as I write, and let it be enough that I wrote. Most of the time, it gets me feeling good about writing again. On the days it doesn't, I close my laptop and move on. That is like so much of the mindset that I want to aspire to have this year. I talked before about like feeling guilty when I'm not being productive. And I think this is actually a product of being an overachiever. Like, I had a lot of pressure put on me in terms of education, and so I think some of that pressure translated into like a really big fear of failure in life. Then I just kind of get in this mindset of like, if I'm not writing, even when I'm filming these videos and like editing them and stuff like that, I feel guilty sometimes that I'm not writing. And out with friends, sometimes I feel guilty that I'm not writing. If you're having a really bad day, it's enough that you tried. And not every day is going to be a bad writing day. I write because I feel ill when I go too long without writing. I don't know how to explain it, but writing has been how I've dealt with trauma and grief, and even happiness and excitement ever since I learned to write. So if I'm left without a way to write for too long, I start to feel mentally and physically weird in a bad way. I turned 18 without publishing anything, then 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. The guilt and disappointment tore me apart for years, but after burning out and dealing with a lot of mental health issues in university, I finally started writing silly stories just for myself again. When I graduated, I had planned on trying the serious aspiring author thing again, but instead I made the conscious decision to keep writing as a hobby, to just have fun like I used to. I really admire writers who are just doing writing as a hobby or don't necessarily have like concrete goals, getting to the end of this story, or just doing it to have a good time. I try to consciously do more of this almost every single day, and I try to, whenever I'm like reading over my writing, especially at like the start of a writing session, I try to read over like the scene that I wrote the other day, or I try to like read over a story that I wrote a while ago, and I just try to read it as a reader would read it. You will like get excited about your work again. If you try to, you're gonna have a good time. You would be surprised at how enjoyable it is to just like read your writing with fresh eyes. When I was talking to Rachel, she said something about like opening up your story, like downloading your story and like opening it as a PDF on your phone, or just opening it in any way where you can't edit it and just scroll through it like it's a book. I actually did that recently with my adult fantasy that I wrote last year. I was surprised at how all of a sudden I was like I was like reading over scenes and I was like giggling, I was laughing, I was gasping. I was like, did I actually write this line? Like, why is that kind of a banger? Yeah, nothing gets me like more excited and happy than trying to do that every once in a while. I think that's really the only thing that has kept me going when it gets really, really tough. I write because I love stories and magic and exploring relationships and creating entire worlds and people. I like this answer too. There's definitely a subsection of writers who really love the systematic part about writing. This is, I can only speak for, I guess, genre fiction, and literary tends to be very internal, very character focused, but I do think that there are certain writers that like just love the process of like making a magic system or creating the entire like historical timeline of secondary world. I like writing alternate history. I like writing just like coming up with like historical events and stuff like that, and seeing how like a society would look like if those historical events had taken place. That is like what I really, really enjoy about genre fiction, because writing is a way of reaching out into the world and beyond, but also reaching into myself. It is the only thing that makes me feel alive and gives my life purpose, and without it, I would not be the person I am now. And I definitely also agree with that sentiment that writing has always felt like a way for me to like make sense of not just the world, but also myself and my place in the world. And I like this idea that there can be something that will outlive you in your words. Writing has simply always been a part of my life, whether it was journaling or fan fiction or origin fiction or songwriting. I think expressing myself through words is something that's natural to me. This is so true. I also had a fan fiction era when I was a teenager. That really helped me grow a lot as a writer, and it gave me that external validation that I needed at that time to really like keep myself going. To actually answer the question of why I write, it's mainly the desire to see the stories I never got as a child, stories with Black girls as protagonists, and stories of girls falling in love with other girls. Writing has also become a way to express my inner world, all my fears and wants. I think ultimately writing is a way for me to process the world around me. Yeah, I love that. Fun fact about my stories is that no one is like ever straight in my stories. Maybe that's like a little bit escapist, but I don't really care. Straight isn't necessarily the default state of being. Those are like the kinds of worlds that I write. I write so that I can dispense whatever good philosophies these crazy characters are coming up with as I write them and flesh them out. They're real people with real things to say, even though they're fake. Like sometimes I do genuinely think it's so funny that like all of us are just writing these imaginary people running around doing crazy things. In reality, I do definitely relate to that feeling of like these characters having real things that they want to say, and by extension what I want to say. I've talked before about how theme is a really important aspect of writing for me, and to me I really see theme as that like wider message. It's the reason that the story exists at all, just as much as character is important to me, and exploring like a character's journey and the changes in their mindset and then in their emotions. I think theme is just as important. I really like the way words flow into one another, the rhythm of good prose, the feeling of creating that. I also struggle to express myself in speech. The only time I feel like I can truly express what's in my head is when I'm alone with my words. Yeah, this is also really relatable. I have gotten comments from people, I don't want to say mistakenly, but surprisingly tell me, like, say like, oh, you sound so articulate and stuff like that. I don't think I actually am. Especially in YouTube videos. Keep in mind, YouTube videos, these are edited, okay? There's such thing as multiple takes. If I have the time to think about what I want to say before I say it, if I'm talking about something that I feel fairly knowledgeable about or that I feel passionately about, yes, I can speak about it. But I do agree that despite the fact that I am a writer or whatever, I also don't feel like I quote unquote think fast enough to always say exactly what I want to say in a conversation. Also, I totally feel you on like the rhythm of good prose. I think I've even said this before in a video. I think it's probably when I was I did that video with Rachel about craft, but I used to be such a prose snob where I liked a really certain way of writing, and I would kind of look down on books that didn't have what I considered to be, in my subjective opinion, really good polished prose. So I think I've let go of that as a reader. But as a writer, like for my own works, I hold myself to a certain like style. If I'm not having fun like with the rhythm of the prose, then I'm not having fun during a writing session. And that's a double-edged sword. I feel like on one hand it forces me to really push my skills farther, but at the same time sometimes it means that I can get really drained. I tend to start a lot of my writing sessions by reading. I like to get that sort of vibe flowing through me before I start writing. Oh, let's read some of Rachel's. It took me forever to realize no one was coming to get me out of the gutter and that I had to do it myself. And now I find those days don't happen at all since I've come to accept failure and uncertainty. The writing career is such a fun question because writing first and foremost for me is a vocation. I technically have a writing career, sure, I've published so much, but my relationship with writing hasn't switched from vocation to solely career. I don't know if I'm interested in publishing my novels, but it's very hard to feel like that's not the next step in my life since I'm graduating, published most of my short fiction, etc. One night in September, I was half asleep with anxiety over having to publish a novel as a next step. I remember my tired brain going, "You don't ever have to write for anyone ever again," and that changed me. I already knew this and I've been preaching and practicing this, but to have a tired voice in my brain confirm it was great. If I have books I want to publish and to make a career of, great, but I won't allow external pressure to make me feel like that's the next step because there is no next step except for the one I take. And why is Rachel writing novels? In the comment section of my community tab. Yeah, Rachel's always been so inspirational to me, I think, as a writer, as a person, as a content creator. Her outlook on writing is really fascinating. First of all, she is really young. And not only that, but she's been published so much. She has a writing career. And I love what she said about how even though she has a writing career, it hasn't felt like her relationship with writing has necessarily changed at its core. And that's what I want to try to remember more as I kind of move forward my own next step. But I think what really struck a chord with me was this feeling of like, you don't owe anyone or anything that next step in your life beyond you really want and what you really desire. I know all of this kind of stuff is like easier said than done or whatever, but hearing it come from someone like Rachel, her writing is so good and she has like such a dedication to the craft. She feels like she has like such a maturity to her. It just resonated with me so much. And I think like when I read that comment from her, I just immediately felt so, my spirits felt so buoyed. It was like everything that I needed to hear from another writer about what their relationship is with their craft, because I think there's so much that I can learn from that. Thank you so much to everyone who left comments and shared their perspectives with me. I genuinely had like the best time ever reading all of your responses. I was actually kind of inspired to make this video because a while ago, I think it was almost a year ago now, when I did a 1,000 subscriber Q&A, one of you guys had asked me, why do I write? This is what I said in that video.
I think that I write because I don't know how not to. I think different stories reflect different facets of my personality, my interests, and I think through writing different stories, I learn new things about myself too. And I think the reason that I see myself as such a character focused type of writer is because I think I find a lot of catharsis in giving characters closure, building up these people, crafting their problems and insecurities, carving a path for them to overcome those things, because I think in a lot of ways I hope that I can also one day learn to overcome my own problems and insecurities too.
I feel like that response hasn't changed. I think all of those things are true, but learning to remember those things every single day, during every single writing session, during every single time that writing gets hard, that's the difficult part. Whatever you guys want to accomplish in your own writing journeys, whether that is a hobby or a career or whatever, I sincerely hope that you never stop and that you keep going. That's the end of this video. I hope all of your writing projects are going well, and I will see you guys in the next video.
I ain't never been one to not follow the signs. You're looking like a one-way. Gotta make the right choice. Hope I make the right noise. Hoping that you like boys like me. I know you're feeling me from across the room. I got a feeling you could be my muse. I hear